That was the first time I'd ever been in Lauren's house. It was very different than I had expected. Her home was lovely, her kitchen done in a beautiful green meadow style that had happy little cows grazing and capering across the walls. She offered me coffee, and I gladly accepted it. I was still groggy from the night before, and the coffee was nice and warm and sweet. She went down into the basement, the door in the kitchen much like ours was, and left me in her placid cow kitchen for about 20 minutes. I sat, drinking coffee, basking in the cute peace of the make-believe pasture, and feeling at ease for the first time all week. It was a feeling that would not last long. She came back, walking slowly up the steep wooden steps, and stuck her head into the kitchen. "Come down into the office. Michael wants to talk about your situation." I followed her into the basement, and it was like walking into a whole different world. The basement looked like a thrift store, except thrift stores don't actually keep their items behind locked glass cases most of the time. The basement was a maze of shelves and cases, each one holding different things. I couldn't help but look around, and as I walked through the labyrinth of shelves, I saw dolls and masks and tea sets and books and all sorts of things. It was a lot to take in all at once, and I was almost glad when I found the little alcove at the end of the shelves where Michael was typing on an ancient computer. He offered me a chair and smiled at me as he invited me to tell him about my problems. With Lauren's reassurance, I began to recount the events of last week. Michael listened as I told him about the doors, the chairs, the noises, the objects being stacked, and finally, the light bulbs. He listened intently, nodding at certain points and writing down specific things. After my story was told, he asked me to tell it again. He wanted me to tell it fully, leaving out nothing, with time and dates and events. He wanted a complete picture of events so he could make a plan of attack, and it threw me a little when he said that. Attack? Attack what? Why, the spirits in your house, of course. I told it to him again, omitting nothing, and when I was done, he steepled his fingers and looked at me knowingly. "You are very fortunate to have us as neighbors. I think we can help you, but we will need to act quickly. First, I'll need some data on what sort of entity is threatening you and your husband. I think cameras placed in your home might help with that. After that, we can figure out what we'll need to cleanse the spirits from your home." He and Lauren assured me that it would be a simple matter to do this, and all that we needed was my husband's blessing. My husband, however, was not giving his blessing. "You want to let people we just met put cameras in our house because of some weirdness? I know we had a scare, but honestly, I think it's just someone messing with us." I countered, asking how they kept getting into the house. The police never found any sign of forced entry, and nothing was ever stolen. Why would someone keep coming back like that? He only shrugged from the bed, his bandaged foot still a little red. "Maybe it's kids. Who knows? Maybe they know some secret way into the house. Maybe it's the realtor who had a better offer and wants to see if he can get us to sell. Hell, maybe it's some guy in a rubber mask who's trying to run us off for the mineral rights to our land. I don't know, but I do know that we haven't seen anything more paranormal than the actions of someone bored and looking to mess with the new people on the block." I was a little angry that he wasn't taking this more seriously, but I couldn't hold it against him. Roger didn't put much stock in the paranormal. If he couldn't see it or touch it, then it didn't exist to him. He could be very stubborn about these types of things too. I had hoped that seeing the events of the night before with his own eyes would help persuade him, but it appeared that he still thought this was just a trick of the living. When Lauren and Michael came over for dinner, I had hoped they would talk him into it. As Michael laid out his plan and Roger sat listening politely, all I could think about was what I had seen the night before. I needed to see what it was. I needed to see some proof of what I had witnessed. I needed to know that it had existed, and that I wasn't just seeing things. I needed it bad enough to help bring their plans to fruition. Roger sat politely and listened, but in the end, he refused them, albeit kindly. "No offense, Michael. You seem like a nice guy who's just trying to help, but I don't want to encourage whatever this is by putting on a show. If this is someone, then they aren't going to run us off. And if it's some ghost, they certainly aren't going to run us off. So let's just let it lay. All right, Michael? Michael only nodded, saying that if we changed our minds, he'd be happy to help us. When they took their leave, we got into a little fight over it. I told Roger what I wanted, and he explained why he didn't want to egg on whatever it was. We got a little heated, a little loud, and he finally decided to sleep on the couch, giving me the bedroom. I flopped down after getting ready for bed, wanting him here with me, but too angry to apologize just yet. Somehow, I fell asleep, and when I woke up, it was pitch black. It was the dark of the night, and I could feel someone watching me. You know when you're a kid, and you wake up thinking something's watching you? You look at that pile of clothes and see a monster, or look at the closet and see one big eye looking out at you. Well, that's what this was like. I was lying in bed, shivering a little as I broke out in a cold sweat. I glanced around, looking for the source of the peeking, when my eyes made contact with it. It was standing in the doorway. Its ghostly white face floated in the doorway. It took me a moment to pick its body out of the darkness, at first thinking the face really was floating when I finally caught the dark outline of a humanoid body. The mask wasn't the glow-in-the-dark kind you see trick-or-treaters wearing, but the smooth white porcelain of a ceremonial mask. The face on it was that of a demon, the ink swaying, grinning, and gnashing its teeth as it maintained eye contact. We held our stares for a good 20 seconds, my eyes begging my brain to make this a dream before I pealed out a long, loud scream that shook the rafters. Then the devil shot off towards the back of the house. I had expected Roger to run to see why I was screaming. To my surprise, I heard him scream as well, a bellowing roar that not quite drowned out the loud whump of something heavy impacting the floor. He came scrambling into the room a moment later, wincing with every step as he came down on his injured foot. He slammed the door, panting, and said that he was sorry for not believing me. I heard other noises going on in the house, but he just locked the door and said he believed now that we might need some help. After what I saw, I think we might need the whole damn Catholic Church. Roger told me about what he had seen in the living room, his voice still shaking. He told me how he had woken up suddenly and wasn't sure why at first. You know how you can feel something watching you sometimes? Like you don't know where it is, but you feel it watching. Well, that's what woke me up. He had come awake groggily, looking around blearily, before the source of the staring became apparent. The living room was dark, the nightlight in the kitchen casting a semi-luminescence over the room, and it took his eyes a minute to adjust. Roger said he'd thought it was his foot at first. It had been hurting before he finally dropped off, but he quickly realized that wasn't it. What had been watching him was a crouching something, its white face staring down from the coffee table that was floating off the ground. Roger said he and the thing had looked at each other for about 30 seconds before he started to scream. His face, he said with a shudder. It was like a Rorschach picture. It moved as I looked at it. It didn't look right. It didn't move right. It was like watching one of those magnetic pictures as it falls apart, or an Etch-a-Sketch when someone shakes it. He said it ran off towards the kitchen as the table came crashing down onto the floor. Roger had run too, hearing me screaming and coming to be with me. He didn't know what they were or where they had come from, but he knew that what he had seen had scared him. I got up then, grabbing my stick and telling him that we needed to make sure that whatever it was wasn't lurking around somewhere. I think I was honestly hoping that we would see it again. I wanted Roger to be sure. No second guesses when we invited Michael and Lauren to help us. We went through each of the back rooms first. We had meant to put children in those rooms, natural or adopted. However, as long as this thing was stalking the halls, that was a dream that couldn't be realized. We searched every room, Roger watching the door with his gun, as I searched under the beds and in the closets. I saw no evidence of anything being in any of them, despite seeing the creature come this way. I had just opened the closet in the last room, Roger saying how maybe we should search the bathroom, when I saw it burst out and run at me. It scared me half to death, the sight of it making me backpedal, and it shoved past Roger as it kept running. Roger was frozen for a second, the white face of the thing looking horrible. He turned as it went towards the kitchen, however, and leveled his gun as he took a shot. The gun clicked dry, though, and Roger worked the slide, finding it unloaded. He pumped it frantically, not understanding, and I came shakily to him as he struggled with the gun. It was loaded yesterday. I had seen him load it. But it was suddenly empty, and Roger only goggled at it as the back of the creature departed into the kitchen. I loaded it. It was fully loaded, he said, and he sounded as confused as I was. We came shakily into the kitchen, Roger holding the gun like a club, and found the basement door open wide. No chairs were stacked tonight, but I suppose they really hadn't had time, what was scaring the shit out of all of us. We went to check the basement, and that's where we found the shotgun shells. They were laid out neatly on a shelf in the corner. Roger touched them like he couldn't believe they were actually there. Of the demon or ghost or whatever it had been, there was nothing. We called the Chavezes the next day. Michael and Lauren came immediately, their van out front and loaded with equipment. They started setting up, cameras at key points in the house, and all of them recording 24/7. Michael explained that the cameras would download the footage to an external server in their basement, so they wouldn't miss a thing. They set up their equipment and decided to monitor it from their basement. That way, we won't affect anything while we're recording, Michael said. Wouldn't want our presence to mess up the footage. While setting up, I noticed something on the side of one of the cameras that made Lauren jump. It was a sticker on the side of one, a white ghost coming out of the words, Chavez's Hunts. She tried to brush it off, saying it was nothing, but when I pressed her, she sheepishly told me that most of this stuff was from a project they used to do. It was just a little something, a show on a little network that no one had probably ever heard of. We would go into people's houses, kind of like what we're doing here, and help them get the ghosts out. We nearly got picked up for syndication. A bigger network was interested, but we had a little accident and they decided not to. An accident, I asked? Yeah, it was nothing. We bit off a little more than we could chew, I suppose. Someone's house burned down and they were pretty mad. The network decided that we had been reckless. The insurance we had paid for the accident, but that was the end of our ghost hunting days. At least until we moved in next door here, she added. We joked about it a little more, but I thought it was weird that she had never mentioned it. We finished setting up, and she said that she'd be going back home to check the feeds. I picked up a little, some mess having been left behind from our efforts, and found myself looking around constantly as I shuffled through the house. I felt ill at ease, the feeling of being watched now constant, and I hoped it wasn't from the cameras. When I was done cleaning up, I took the trash out and saw that the mail had run. There was a circular from the local paper, a bill from my cellular company, and a weird letter with nothing written on it. It was a plain white envelope, no address or return address, and had not been brought by the postman. I looked up and down the block like I expected to see a mysterious person hiding somewhere nearby, and brought it inside. I opened it and let a single piece of paper peek out from the top. I shook it out and found a cryptic message and more questions than answers. Meet me at Darren's Beans tomorrow at noon. I have information about the Chavezes you should know. Good evening, my little creeperonis. It's me, Dr. Plague. Thank you so much for joining me for part 2 of Bumpin' the Night. If you liked what you heard, come back next week for part 3. There may be anywhere from 5 to 6 parts. I haven't really decided yet, but we shall see how it goes. If you'd like to support the show, we have a Patreon in the comments section. $5 contributors get their names read at the end of every video, so if you'd like to have your name read at the end, come be one of my $5 contributors. Or as always, we have books available on Amazon. I've left a link to my latest, Dark Journeys. And of course, thanks for stopping by. Dr. Plague, signing off. Have a wonderful evening.